Hello and welcome to Electric Sheep episode 10. My name is Carl Sykes, and with me this week are my colleagues Paul Andrews.
Hello.
And returning from a spell of absence, Lyndsey Muir.
Hello.
And for those of you who remember back to episode 1 of Electric Sheep, our colleague Amanda Lawrence.
Hello.
This week we're going to talk about, amongst other things, the BETT show, which, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago we talked about that myself, Lyndsey and Amanda and our colleague Richard were heading up to London to attend the BETT show and get some information about what technologies are out there at the moment for use in primary schools, FE colleges, higher education, and also in the workplace learning environment. Before we get on to that, we're going to do our usual round robin of what we've been up to this week. So if we start with Paul, because I know he's raring to go here. So Paul, what have you been doing this week?
Well, apart from being very jealous that you all got to go to BETT,
of course.
I didn't. This week I was really fortunate. I got invited to talk to a load of students about how they can use various tools and technologies to support qualitative research. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, there are essentially two different types of research. There's quantitative, which is all about kind of collecting numbers and data, and qualitative, which is all about getting people to write things down in terms of how they're feeling or their opinions or viewpoints on things.
Okay.
So it was focused very much on the latter. So we looked at a couple of things. The first thing we looked at was Wordle, which is a lovely free website that lets you put basically huge chunks of text in, and what it basically does is it'll look at that text you've put in, and it'll pick out keywords that keep cropping up, and the more times they crop up, the larger they'll be in the word cloud itself. So it essentially allows the students to grab a whole load of text, shove it in, and then spot really easily any common themes or any common words that are cropping up in that qualitative data.
Right. Okay. And I guess the fact it gives you a kind of an image, I assume, with these words in the cloud, is something you could use in kind of presentations showing your data findings.
Yeah.
As well.
So they were saying basically they've got to write up a dissertation project, but they were saying how nice it was because yes, they might include the raw data, but they would be able to put these little kind of screenshots into the actual word clouds that they use. And the other nice thing is, if you get a word that's cropping up that's not actually relevant to the research that you're doing, so for example, the word "the" might crop up a lot, you can just click on it in the word cloud and it will ask you if you want to remove it from that word cloud. So you can remove kind of nonsense words or erroneous words or words that have nothing to do with the data you try.
Right. Does it replace it with another word that kind of has less responses but hasn't been included as part of the cloud? Or
it basically reshuffles the whole thing. So it recalculates all the totals, and then you'll find that other words maybe get slightly bigger because their frequencies are a little bit higher now.
Right, okay. And is this something that you've used kind of in your day-to-day basis in terms of presentations maybe you've given or classes you've taught?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's very useful when we're doing when we're supporting educators with their module evaluation feedbacks. It's always quite useful because what we tend to find is that, if you've got quite a large module, so you've got 100, 150 responses, it's very easy to ask them numerical questions, rate on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you with this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But then there's always that room for giving comments back, and in the nicest way, there aren't many people who've got the time to sit through and read all of those comments.
No.
With everything else we've got to do. So the idea is we can use a tool like Wordle to pick out keywords, and if we can see a certain word cropping up a lot, we can then go into the actual documents themselves and do like a find and replace or a simple find to actually pull out the comments themselves that contain those keywords. So it allows us to kind of home in on what's being said and why.
That's great, because I'm guessing before something like this, it was a huge task to have to search through all the responses that you had to pick out the keywords visually. Just kind of looking at the responses you've got, whether they're paper based or online.
Absolutely.
And at least this way, it kind of does 90% of the hard work for you, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I was stressing to them, I was saying, look, it doesn't do the work for you in terms of analysing the data, but it just gives you it in a way that lets you get to that data a little bit faster. So that, they were quite kind of pleased with with that. They were going to go and have a play, and I mean, the nice thing about it's so easy to use. You literally go to Wordle.com, paste the text in, hit a button, and it generates the cloud for you. So that's great.
That's great. And I mean, the key part of it, as you said, is the analysis, not necessarily the time spent actually looking through the responses. So, in terms of the work done, like, as you say, it kind of takes away the fiddly stuff and leaves the students with the actual proper nitty gritty of the work that they need to then get on with. And it frees up their time.
Yes, I think so.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. We'll put a link to that on the site as normal. Fantastic. Wordle's brilliant. So we'll move on to Lyndsey, and I'm sure she's got a few bits and pieces she can tell us about. So, Lyndsey, what have you been up to this week?
Well, this week I'm still working with my set of primary schools in the Blaenau Gwent area.
Excellent.
supporting them to enhance their technological skills.
Mm-hmm.
And this week I've been trying to investigate if they're all interested in green screening, basically.
Okay.
And some of them are already doing it.
Well,
and
can I stop you there for a second? If somebody's wondering, what's green screening? What exactly does that mean? Is there any way you can kind of just roughly tell us exactly, in layman's terms, what you mean?
Well, basically, it's where, like in the movies, they'll have, or it could be a blue screen, so they'll have a great big green partition behind the actor, or a blue partition.
Mm-hmm.
And then the person in front will pretend to be driving or something, and then they'd run a film of them in a car behind.
I see. Okay, so it's kind of overlaying a secondary image behind the real actor or whatever it might be in front to make it look like they're in a particular location or whatever.
That's it. So the idea is in some of the primary school classrooms, they've been encouraging the children to pretend they're news presenters or something, and give snippets of news from the school. So they might have a snowy scene behind, but the child's actually standing in the classroom. But you can see the benefit to children. It's quite an exciting project for them to be working on.
Absolutely, and for old buggers like us who remember back in the day when we were all in school,
we would be out in the snow.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably health and safety wouldn't allow students to go out now. But I mean, it's a fantastic. Well, yeah, quite. It's a fantastic, advancement in terms of the technology that students are using now to be able to have this green screened technology. Because I mean, even at secondary school level and higher education level, it's something that's only come in recently in the last 10 years or so. So to have it at primary school level and for students to be able to practice with it is fantastic.
Yeah. So one of my tasks this week has been searching high and low for royalty-free video that the schools can use, because obviously, as we know, in the current climate, they haven't got a lot of budget to spend on innovative projects such as this. And so that's what I've been searching for. So if anyone out there's got any ideas or links to websites that offer free bits of video that can be used in green or blue screening, then please do let us know, because that would be really beneficial.
Cool. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the main part of the show, which is getting these three fine people who are joining me in the studio to talk about the experiences they had last Friday when they went over to the BETT conference. So what happened? What did you see? What did you like?
I saw the top of Professor Brian Cox's head.
You saw the top of his head?
I saw the quiff of his fringe, just briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that was the highlight, and the downside for me is the fact we couldn't get to see him.
I'm sure the highlight of the event wasn't seeing the top of Brian Cox's head.
It was for me.
It was you. Okay.
It was Johnny Paul for Carl, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Many ladies of a certain age agreeing with Lyndsey there, going yes.
I think perhaps saying that we're selling BETT a little short there. That was the best thing about the show. But I mean, it was a fantastic time. Luckily, myself and Lyndsey were very, very lucky and were able to go last year as well. So we were really keen to get back to the BETT show this year and see how it's changed. Last year it was at the Olympia.
Yep.
This year, because of just the vast numbers of people who were taking part and attending, they moved it to the XL. I don't know, is it the XL Arena or the XL Centre? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
XL Centre. And I think they're expecting something like around about 6,000 to 10,000 people. I don't know the exact number, but it was huge over the course of 5 or 6 days. So a massive, massive event. And I think we got a lot of good stuff out of it. I mean, it was a trade show in the first instance, so huge number of stalls and stands with trade companies on trying to sell their wares. But outside of that, there were workshops, presentations, keynote talks like Lyndsey's just mentioned with Professor Brian Cox. And lots of events that you could take part in throughout the course of the day that you were there. So that was a really, really useful kind of session to attend. Yeah.
So were there any did you see any technologies or tools that you hadn't seen before that you thought actually those might be quite useful? That's a no.
Sorry. No, I did. I just couldn't think of one off the top of my head then. Go on, Amanda, you were going to say something.
One of mine isn't technology. That's my big thing. It was a table that's actually a whiteboard. So you write on it as a tabletop. And when you're finished, you can flip the table up.
I've got one of those in my daughter's. It's called my kitchen table. Yeah, it's fine.
But you can't flip that one up and use it as a board then. So it's actually really good because, I mean, within CALT, we've done a few conferences and occasionally a World Cafe appears.
Yes.
So we just have to run around and get in tablecloths and
sure.
whatnot. But this is just a table that you can straight away write on. It's like a whiteboard at this table, and then when you're finished you can tilt it and use it as like a presentation board.
I like that idea.
So it's quite good. That was good, like that.
And presumably fairly inexpensive, I guess, because it's kind of going to be on.
I've got to be honest, I think I was blown away by it and didn't look at that part, so I'll have to, we'll look into that one.
I think, actually, just going on from the point you've just made there, I think I kind of naively tweeted during the event that there were lots and lots of expensive gadgets here, and and someone rightly corrected me on Twitter by saying, well, yes, BETT is about showcasing a lot of expensive gadgetry, but the workshops that they run alongside the showcasing of those gadgets tell you about getting a return for your investment when you buy. So it's not necessarily all about the expense of the thing, but actually it's about how you'd use that to its fullest value and actually get a return on the investment that you put in. And I think I think you've got to put money in to get something decent back out, really. And when it comes to technology, not in all cases. We've talked about Raspberry Pi before, for example. That's a great example of it. But there were lots of expensive items, but it's about how you use it and the investment you put in and the return you get back from that investment.
Well, I think that's important to note. We weren't there on a shopping spree.
No. As much as we'd like to have been.
Yes. But we're there really to sort of scope out the market and see what is the cutting edge of technology and see what's going on in primary schools and secondary schools and further education institutions. Because we're all about open software, I suppose it's kind of against what we're all about. But it's very interesting to see what's going on.
Yeah, I suppose you can go along and you can see what solutions people are trying to kind of provide or offer, and then maybe identify, saying, well, actually, that's a good solution, but you can replicate that for nothing using this. So as purely as like an ideas or a fact finding exercise, it's worthwhile.
Absolutely, and actually, as Lyndsey just said, yes, we are all about the open source stuff, but you still need the hardware to put that open source stuff on, and I think that's the key thing. Yes, we're all about the kind of free stuff, but
hardware,
absolutely it was, but some great stuff. I mean, a mass explosion of kind of smart boards and whiteboards compared to the year before. I mean, it was literally every other stall was a smart board or a whiteboard. So clearly, I think that's an indication of the way that schools and primarily, a lot of the stands were focused towards secondary schools and primary schools. Not completely, but a huge amount of them. And I think, judging by the amount that were available, that's obviously a huge advance in technology and the way things seem to be going. And I think it's all about what you can add to make the next better step in terms of that whiteboard or smartboard. What little gadget can you add to it to make it better than your kind of neighbour? So, I mean, there's a huge amount of fantastic items out there.
I mean, the whiteboards. I mean, I've been using whiteboards for years now. I mean, and the last time I used an interactive whiteboard properly, it still had kind of like plastic pens that you had to kind of pick up and draw on. Has the technology moved on beyond that? Is it a case of do they have kind of projectors projecting stuff onto the whiteboard, or?
Well, I mean, it has moved on, certainly. I mean, actually, bizarrely enough, the one thing that just sprung into my mind, and it sounds a bit silly, but you could see absolutely why people would use it. They had a sort of a digital spray can that you could use to graffiti the smartboard and change the colour with the spray can. And actually, that was great. That was fantastic.
I saw that. My daughter's watched this program called The Slammer.
Oh, okay.
On Kids Children's BBC, and he actually, I think the company were there, but he was like one of the things, and they had like 3 minutes, and he was doing all that on the actual thing. It looked really cool.
Yeah, it was absolutely. But I think there's so much more to as kind of an electronic smartboard than it would have been 2, 3, or 4 years ago. There's a lot more touch screen stuff out there now that you don't need to kind of have lots of handheld devices with you. So that was very useful.
One thing which wasn't particularly technologically marvellous, but protects your technology, was that...
Yeah, the iStorage. It's a USB pen that's got... you have to tap in a code to use it. So it's got like a little keypad on your USB pen, so that once you take it out of the machine, it automatically locks itself so that nobody else can read the data that's on there.
Oh, okay.
And then, as when you put it into the machine, I think you then type in your code to read it, which if you've got anything confidential, obviously, and you happen to drop or leave your USB somewhere, nobody else can A, read what's on there, or B, then use it again. So that's quite a good...
That is
quite
good,
like that, yeah.
Because at the moment, everyone seems to be losing things on trains.
Yeah. I know a lot of sort of councils and things like that use something similar at the moment, although I know that they can be a bit of a pain because they're only, they have a lot of problems with certain machine, so it might work on a PC, but then someone sticks it in a Mac and it's a nightmare or whatever. So perhaps that's more the target audience there, kind of people who are carrying really secure data around with them and need to make sure that if it's lost or whatever, nobody's going to be able to break into it and access it.
Because at the end of the day, they're so little, they get lost.
Yes, this is why
you find them everywhere.
I won't use them.
I was going to say, you're not an advocate of the...
I'm not an advocate either, but for people who do use them...
I mean, the one thing that I've got, which is really cool now, so I was waxing lyrical on last week's podcast, the fact that I actually entered the 21st century and got myself a smartphone.
Indeed.
But the one thing that's nice that I've got is this Google Authenticator app. Now, previously, when I had to log into my Google account, I set up something called two-stage verification. So every time I went to log in, it would text me a little code that I had to then type back into the computer. So the idea is, even if someone nicked my password, if they haven't got my phone, they can't get in. But sometimes the text will take a long time to come through. So what you can now get on Google, it's a free app and it's on Android and iOS, is this authenticator. So you pair it up with your account by scanning a little QR code using the camera on your phone. And then it must be like a time thing. It has some kind of algorithm that says we know what account it is and we know what the time and date is. And it generates a code every 30 seconds. And you have to, when you log in, you type in the latest code that's displayed on your screen.
Oh, okay.
And then you can get in. So again...
It's a simpler process than what you were doing before.
It's a much simpler process. I haven't got to wait for text message to come through, but it does mean...
Because that would annoy me, waiting for text messages to get in somewhere.
And sometimes we'd be at University of Wales Newport, like where we are recording this podcast, kind of in the depths of the basement, essentially, and sometimes you can't get a signal. So this way, it's just a nice little tool that kind of gets around that. But yeah, I mean, something to lock down your documents. Carl says some councils won't use cloud storage.
No, absolutely.
And they have to use USB sticks. So this sounds like
it's good.
a really good, nifty little system.
And I'm sure listeners will be pleased to know that Paul has donated his own old phone to the National History Museum to put on display. So
tin can and some string. It was.
I mean, there were loads of great technology stuff, but actually there were some really good bits and pieces that weren't that techie, but still really, really impressed. And I know there was one that Amanda was talking about just a little while ago before we came into the podcast recording. I don't know whether you want to kind of briefly explain this.
Well, it was just like a rubber frame that fits around your iPad or anything else really, and it makes it much easier to hold, for one thing. But then Carl and I had a bit of a gasp moment because the man just told somebody just to drop it on the floor, and it was just but it just bounced. Nothing.
Wow.
Which
Lyndsey, it'd be good for you.
Last year at BETT at 6 o'clock in the morning, when Carl's wife Lisa very kindly gave us a lift in the pitch black, opened the car door, my iPad smash on the floor, and that was on the way to BETT last year.
That was unfortunate.
I'm all for stuff that protects your kit because I'm very clumsy.
And even more impressive than that. I mean, it does probably, if you're listening and it doesn't sound impressive, it really was. You had to be there. But even more impressive was they dropped it face down onto the floor, and then the chap who was demonstrating jumped on top of the iPad with this cover on, and still managed to pick it up with no cracks or breaks or anything on the screen.
How does it do that then? Is it like got extra thick rubber corners that stops it from hitting the ground?
It was kind of a circular rubber. Well, not circular, but it was kind of circular in shape, that went around the outside of the iPad and had sort of almost grip handles on the side. Absolutely, almost like a steering wheel.
I just have to apologise to the listeners who can't see you gesticulating because you're describing it beautifully with your hands.
I am, and for those of you who were able to, sorry, I am describing it with my hands, which isn't great for radio. But yeah, so I mean, and it's a really useful tool that seemed to kind of protect. And
I'll tell you what it was like. Mario Kart, on the Wii, where you slot your Wii remote into the steering wheel.
Okay.
It was kind of like that. Kind of like that.
You got it now. You got it now.
Talking about video games, I'm like, no.
But so that was just an example, I think, of kind of, it wasn't hugely technological, but in terms of protecting your technology, it was a great item. And I think actually, especially because of the fact that schools are now bringing in iPads by the absolute dozen, and how many of these things are going to be broken? And there's lots of dodgy insurance companies out there. Not all. There's lots of great insurance companies as well, but there are lots of dodgy insurance companies who will be very reluctant to pay out on broken iPads continuously. And if you've got them in the hands of 5 and 6 year old kids, they're going to get broken very easily. So actually, it seemed like a really good investment. for the life of me, we can't unfortunately think what the name of the company was, but
We'll
we'll certainly track
and
it down and find out and put some information on there, because I think it might be something that people are interested in for sure. And I just wanted to kind of very quickly touch on a couple of the speakers that were there at the event, because we only very briefly brushed over Brian Cox, who was talking kind of about science and breaking down the barriers of science, and his talk was really useful. And another talk who was available at the show was a gentleman, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. People will know who I'm talking about when I say his name, but it was Sugata Mitra. Who created the sort of hole in the wall phenomenon out in I think it was New Delhi, and people who know the backstory of it, he kind of broke a hole in the wall into the kind of urban slum area of New Delhi, and plugged in an old computer there and left it for the slum kids to kind of get involved with, and they were able to not only access the machine but to train each other to use it. And I think the kind of basis of the story is the kind of eventually the Slumdog Millionaire story. It kind of comes back to that. But again, another really inspirational speaker at the event, and I think it's useful. I don't work for BETT, and I'm not trying to sell it here, but in terms of the speakers that are available and the sessions you can attend, they're really useful and informative sessions to go to. So I'd highly recommend, if you are going to BETT for 2014, don't just go to look at what's there on sale, but
I was
actually
going to say the sessions are all free.
Absolutely, there's no cost at all.
There's no cost to go to the BETT show.
Because we get a lot of, I in particular get a lot of emails which I don't forward on to the rest of the team, going, come to this conference, we've got so and so speaking, but by the way, it's going to cost you £300.
Absolutely.
No, but this thing, it's
and these are well-known names. These aren't kind of Johnny Nobody off the street who's used an iPad once. These are good names, and they're not the sort of people that you'd be able to go and see for free anywhere else or any other point. So highly recommended.
It's the kind of thing too that you might not necessarily come back and be able to use everything or something out of what you've seen, but then a couple of months down the line you might be in a situation like with my primary schools where they'll ask a question, we're looking for this, and it'll pop into your head, I've seen that at BETT. But you might not access that information until you need to. Do you see what I mean? It's that kind of environment. There's so much there, but it's really, really worthwhile.
And you also saw my childhood hero, Johnny Ball.
We did indeed, explaining it all.
I was working away, feeling quite sorry for myself that I wasn't in BETT, but I thought, no, it's fine. And then Mr. Sykes sends me this photograph of Johnny Ball, and then I lost it. I was like, it's not fair.
Absolutely. So who'd have thought we'd be celeb spotting as well as all the other good stuff that was available? So highly recommended. And of course, we'll put links to the BETT website on the podcast site as well. So if you want to access it and maybe sign up for next year, you'll be able to do so.
Okay. So, we looked at, you mentioned kind of hardware and kind of like hardware protection and some of the people you saw in the talks. Was there any kind of software that you saw that leapt out at you and you might think, I haven't seen that before, or it was offering something new or a new spin on things, or...
There was a lot of software available. I felt personally, I don't know if the other two who were in the room agreed with me, but almost all the software, in fact, probably about 99% of it was certainly more targeted towards primary and secondary school. There was very little for higher education onwards. Having said that, though, there was earlier in the week a specialist higher education event. Unfortunately, we found about too late, and so missed out on that element, which I'm sure they covered in a lot more depth during that. But certainly, it felt as if a lot more of the software available was for kind of an earlier level of education.
A lot of the software was aimed at people looking for a virtual learning platform.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
There's lots of different types of virtual learning platforms there, isn't there?
Yeah.
And then I was ever so sad to see that the Moodle stand didn't really advertise themselves.
No. Well,
it's literally just a stand with the sign Moodle and two men.
Yes.
And it's difficult.
And I really also want to get up there and show what Moodle can do.
Absolutely.
Like you said,
shout the virtues of Moodle. Absolutely.
Well, I've been to BETT once, and it was the first year that Moodle were actually there, and it was basically, because Moodle's open source.
Absolutely.
It was being staffed by just teachers, normal teachers who'd given up their time, but they didn't really have a budget, and it was literally, they were upstairs. I don't know where they were now, but when I went there, it was at the Olympia. They were kind of upstairs, and they literally had like a little table with like a piece of A4 paper with the Moodle logo pointed on it, and we're like,
Which is so sad for me and for us because we are such Moodle advocates,
Yeah,
you know, having
and I suppose
used
you've got
it
the likes
here.
of like Microsoft, I'm guessing.
Huge stands in comparison.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it almost wants to make me volunteer my time next year and get some sort of setup up there to actually show what Moodle can do and what it's all about, because it's a shame, having visited lots of these schools recently and knowing that they're budget problems, that they're paying so much money for these solutions when there is a perfectly good solution there for free.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I guess that's the main difficulty, isn't it? Is because it essentially is free. There's no cost to anybody who wants to use it, other than actually having to have a server to host it on. Essentially, they don't have the money to be able to showcase themselves. Whereas if you're selling a product that costs £10,000 to buy, you've got that money to go and buy the extra big stand at BETT or whatever event it is. And I think that's the kind of catch-22 situation you're in with the Moodle. It's a fantastic thing that everyone should have a go at and people should be using. But of course, they don't bring in the money. So how do you advertise and showcase yourself without that money to actually allow you to do it?
But I mean, I suppose the other thing is, you guys, you're learning technologies, you're living and breathing this stuff. Would you say that BETT is actually aimed at yourselves, or would you say it's aimed more at your average educator whose main focus is learning and teaching, who knows a little bit about technology? I mean, what's the pitch?
Ultimately, they're looking for people who can make a decision.
Right. So,
you know, where are you from? What do you do? Can you make a decision on getting this, that,
so essentially, they're looking for the managers and the strategists.
I would say so. I would say so. I wouldn't say it's for your average, everyday learning technologist or teacher, unless, like us, you go to get a market perspective across the board. What's going on? What's out there? What's new? That kind of thing. But not necessarily to go and buy a product.
Yeah.
I think it is aimed at people to buy products. Do you think?
I think so. But equally, I think I could say that if you know what you're looking for before you go, you can target specific things. And everybody who goes in gets a little badge with a barcode on it, and every single stall has a barcode scanner. So if you want to get more information that you can bring back to your manager or kind of your purchaser, whoever would spend the money, you can target your stalls you're after. You can get them to scan your barcode, and they'll email you after the event with follow-up information and kind of give you that stuff that you can take on. So I wouldn't necessarily, although Lyndsey is absolutely spot on, it is targeted towards people who've got the budgets and have the money to spend. I wouldn't say, if you're a teacher and you don't have that budget, don't go to BETT at all.
Because we went under that premise, didn't we?
Absolutely.
Just of checking out the market.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I suppose the other thing, I mean, for companies like Moodle who are doing the open source stuff, the hope is that people who are in those positions to make those decisions are familiar with that technology, so they don't just go, oh, well, here's a company that's going to cost me lots of money and I'll buy a solution. They do actually do a scoping exercise.
That's it.
And look at everything, so that, yes, they can look at Moodle, look at the strong community it's got, but also be aware of other competitors by going to things like BETT as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is kind of giving people a huge range of opportunities and options to choose from. Because as much as we kind of shout about Moodle here, we don't want to be the sort of people who just go, Moodle is your only option, that's it, you've got no choice. There are loads of other options out there, and that goes for pretty much every bit of technology that we saw at any point during BETT. There was a piece of technology and there was its competitor that you could compare and contrast with. You could actually go and talk to real people, which I think was nice. Massively important. As much as we harp on about how fantastic technology is, sometimes it's just great to talk to somebody and just get a real face-to-face feel of whether this technology is right for you, what it does, how it works, and actually just get a response from somebody as to whether they think it's suitable. And that's the great thing. Yes, of course they're there to sell stuff, but it's not the hard sell. It's not the kind of knock at your door. We're trying to sell you.
You don't get
broadband
that feeling
or whatever.
there at all. If that's going to put anyone off, you really don't get the hard sell, do you? It's just people are there to, if you want to ask questions, they're available.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with kind of Amanda and what she does, Amanda isn't part of our immediate team, but she is the main administrator for the CELT, which is the big department we kind of belong to and work in. And Amanda's reason for going down to BETT was essentially to check out kind of tools and technologies that might be of use to support administration and, the logistics of running a department in that way. Was there anything you saw that kind of leapt out at you? You think, actually, that's a really good concept or an idea?
Well, something that did sort of catch my eye when we were there is that quite a few companies were there advertising electronic voting systems.
Oh, right.
Which the director of CELT, and who's been a previous guest,
Yes.
Dr. Jo Smedley,
Yes.
she's used in various workshops that she's done. And Carl, you've used them teaching as well.
Yes,
haven't
that's
you?
right. Yes, I used it as a way of kind of peer assessing student videos that were created within a cohort that I worked with. So yeah, and it worked very well actually.
Yeah, and we've used them in a sort of a CELT development day
That's
as well,
right,
didn't we?
staff
So
development.
yeah, it actually worked
So
really
it's
well.
interesting to see that there was several companies there this year, because when Dr. Jo Smedley started doing that, I'd never really seen it before.
Right,
But there were quite a few companies there this year with that sort of software, so that was quite interesting.
Excellent. And with that, I take it they were selling the little handsets with it as well,
Yeah,
so like a whole
yeah,
kind of package.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
And I
But, you know, to sort of echo what everybody said, nobody was doing hard sell
No.
on you. Yeah, they scanned your badge and you might have follow-up emails, but nobody actually made you feel to
That's
the point
good.
where it's a bit uncomfortable and,
Yeah.
you know, pushy. But I think also, you know, like Carl mentioned, the free workshops and talks. I think that alone, if you don't want to look round the stalls,
Absolutely.
they alone were sort of worth
What's worth the
the
trip
trip.
down, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, and kind of just sort of echoing on from what Amanda said there. I mean, it was really good to see that kind of, you know, every single aspect of education in some way or another was covered. So everything from the actual teaching to the administration side to you know, kind of the actual in-lecture software that you'd use. So I mean, there were a huge amount of areas covered, and it didn't really matter kind of what area of higher education or any other level of education you worked in. There was something that was relevant to you that you could kind of go get information about and take away, and hopefully, if not necessarily purchase a bit of hardware or software, at least look at how you could look to implement those elements in other ways into the work that you undertake on a daily basis.
Brilliant. So who had the most interesting stand?
Ooh, that's well. It depends. By interesting, do you mean the most free stuff we could garnish from the stand, or
yeah, whatever was interesting
no.
to you.
I mean,
no free stuff this year.
yeah, it was rather sadly lacking in free goodies this year, which is always beneficial. I mean, there were some fantastic stands there, and and actually the great thing about the stands were that a lot of them were very hands-on as well.
Right.
So it wasn't just a case of you'd go look at the stuff in a glass case and that was it. You could actually pick up the hardware that they had available, play around with it, mess around with it, go to scheduled talks which lasted for about 5 or 10 minutes by people who were working on the stands, or equally you could just kind of browse along and just pick up some leaflets, whatever you wanted to do. But there were huge and varying ways that you could interact with the stalls and stand owners, and actually get a proper practical use of the stuff that they were trying to sell to you. So that was great. And I don't think I'd want to necessarily, I don't know about the other guys, but I don't think I'd necessarily want to name drop one stall as being kind of better than any of the others. But including, you know, kind of huge varying sizes of stalls, everything from the kind of clearly the most expensive stalls that took up a huge portion of the site, right through to kind of small little stands with one guy and his sort of table and sheets of paper advertising his item. But everybody made you feel welcome. Everybody sort of welcomed you across and let you be a part of the kind of BETT experience and actually, you know, kind of just get the most out of the day, essentially. And I think that was the key thing of BETT as a whole, is that it was all about kind of just showcasing all this fantastic stuff that otherwise you'd probably never hear of and never even be able to get in close proximity to.
Gotcha. That sounds fantastic. So going again next year?
That's down to you, boss.
That's what I like to hear.
Okay, so that's about it. So hope you found that useful and informative. So thank you to Lyndsey, Carl and Paul, and from myself. And see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Did I do it again? Is that all right?
It's fine. You do it again
Thanks
if you
for
want
the twiddler,
to.
you're right. Thanks for the twiddly pairs.
Rock in the voice. Rock